My name is Marissa Verzosa, and I am the Senior Community Engagement Specialist here at BECU. A little bit about myself. I have almost 6 years now, and my job mostly consists of helping with our event planning, like Member Summit, working on our scholarship program, and I also get to teach in high schools about some of the topics you might have heard tonight, like banking and budgeting. But tonight I have the honor of teaching you about credit. So a few things to go over before we get started. If you're looking for another session or topic, use the track buttons below this video so that you can navigate through the event and find what you're looking for. At some point in this presentation, there's also going to be a poll for you to take, and you can answer however you'd like using the features again below this video. If at any point you run into a question that you'd like to ask, or there's something that comes up at the end, use the chat function at the right of the screen and we'll be able to address that at the end. I also have my colleague Stacy Black on here, who is one of our financial educators at BECU, and she'll be able to help guide me through those questions and again, address anything that you might have. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, we are excited to teach you about credit tonight. We're going to go over the basics of credit. What does that even mean? What do you do with it? How does it work? Credit reports and scores. You might have heard both of these terms before. We're going to talk about what the similarities are, how they relate, and what the difference is as well. We're going to be talking about the benefits of good credit, because you'll see what good credit can get you. And of course, we'll go through how to build and maintain your credit, because we want you to use all the skills that you've learned tonight to help you get started and take it with you through your adulthood. So let's take a quick pop quiz. Who will never need to look at your credit history? That's the big question right now. Who will never need to look at your credit history? The options we have are your lenders, your high school principal, potential landlords, or potential employers. So go ahead and take a second or two to let us know what you think below. Let us know who will never, the keyword is never, need to look at your credit history. And as you're filling that out, you'll get to see if your thinking was on track, you'll see what the right answer is, and we'll come back to that here in a bit. So the credit 411, let's start with an example that I like to think of, which is that you see the classic situation on TV or in movies where the kid is at home just minding their own day and their parent says, "Congratulations, you have a credit card. Only use this when you really need it. Use it for emergencies." And the kid is thinking, "Great, I have all this money I can spend. I can just swipe away and it's taken care of. I've bought it." But then what ends up happening, and I'm sure you've seen this before, is that the parents actually find out that the card is maxed out. And what that means is all the credit has been spent. You can't use it anymore until it's actually paid off. So then what happens in the end is the parents have to pay that credit card back, and the kids are just learning what it really means to have a credit card. So that's the situation that we want to avoid you running yourself into. So what is credit? We define it as the ability to obtain goods or services before payment based on the trust that payment will be made in the future. So unlike your debit card where you swipe it at the store, you make a purchase, the funds get deducted from your account automatically and those funds are already gone, they're used. A credit card is when you swipe your card, you make a purchase, and that's your promise to pay it back later. So you can get something in that moment with, again, the promise to pay it back later to the company you have your credit card with, or if you have a loan, you promise to pay that loan back over time. So when lenders are considering, for example, is Marissa really going to pay me back? If I give her this loan for an RV, is she going to pay me back over time like we committed to? So think about you, for example. Think about something that you have that is of great value and something that is so fragile. And if someone asks to borrow that, how will you decide if you want to loan it out to them or not? Should you? Should you not? You're probably basing it off of how well you know that person, or maybe even word of mouth based on what you've heard from someone else. You're basing it off of history and trust. And the big thing about credit is that trust is important in the entire process. You want to make sure that you are trustworthy and showing your responsibility so that you can buy for these big things in the moment and pay it back in the future. And then eventually, once you've shown your responsibility, you can buy bigger things. So let's talk about what those things might be. The biggest things that usually come to mind are the big items like buying a house or buying a car. You need credibility to buy these things that have those big price tags. And also, when you're opening a credit card, if you apply for a credit card, there's a chance that you actually might not get it. Again, it's based on how much lenders are willing to take that risk on you and trust that you're going to pay them back if they allow you to spend on a credit card. So if your score, or excuse me, let's actually look at the box on the right side. So other things that you might not always think of that credit is used for are things like an apartment. If you are interested in moving into an apartment, your landlord is going to look at your credit history to see how responsible you might be in living in their complex. Another place that credit is used for is getting a job. If you're applying for a job, your potential employer is going to be interested in seeing, again, how responsible you are outside of work in your personal life to make sure that you can actually be trusted and be responsible in the office. And then the other example that we have here that you might not be thinking of is your cell phone. So let's say you go into the store and you're wanting to get the brand new, the shiny iPhone, and it's expensive, right? If your credit score is low, the service provider may charge you a larger deposit because they may not trust that you'll make your monthly payments on time. So credit comes in handy. Again, really show that you are able to make your payments on time. We'll talk about that in a bit as well. Bottom line is that credit affects everything from buying a home to even getting a job. And the example that I always think about is just a few months ago, I had to go get a new mattress. And when I was getting ready to check out at the register, the salesperson asked me if I wanted to actually take out a loan and pay it back over time. And to do that, I had to have my credit pulled. And I didn't think about that because, again, my mind goes to buying a house, buying a car, even getting an RV or a boat. But credit is available to be used in all aspects. So again, if you were going to loan money to someone, would you loan to someone that you don't trust as much? Those are the things that are taken into account when your credit is being used. So credit is a tool that you use to show you're responsible so that you can get more things later. Now, credit reports and scores. Let's talk about how they relate and what the difference is. Think about your report card. When you have your report card, it shows all of your classes, what grade you received in that class, and then it also has that number, your GPA, that kind of gauges where you are academically. How are you doing in your classes overall? Similar to that, let's apply that concept and think about it in terms of credit. Your credit report is going to be the overall history of all the times that you've applied for a card or owned a credit card, all the times that you've applied for a loan, and all the times that you have actually had a loan to take care of. Your score is going to be a specific number that gauges where you are in your credit. So that's the example that we like to give when you compare what your report card is versus your credit report. So same idea. Let's dive into that a little bit more. When you hear the credit agency or bureau names, typically you hear Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Those are the big three bureaus that collect your credit history over time. They keep track of your credit cards, again, all your loans, every time that you've been denied, everything is on there so that when it comes time that you are interested in applying again for a credit card or even a loan, that information is sold to the person that you're interested in loaning with. So if I walked into BECU and I said, hey, I'd like to get an RV, but I don't have the money right now, would you be able to finance a loan for me? What BECU will do is look at my credit history that is given to them from one of these three bureaus, Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. And they'll be able to look at everything that relates to my credit to see if they can trust me in paying that loan back over time if they end up funding that loan for me. So hopefully when it comes time that I want to get an RV or a boat, I'll be able to do that based on my credit. Let's dive into what the credit report is a little bit more specifically. So again, it's the overall look at your credit history. We say factual in quotation marks because there might be errors on there. For the most part, it is pretty accurate, but we want to encourage you to check periodically so that you're looking out for any mistakes that might show up. For example, a misspelling of your name, that might make a big difference. So your credit report includes personal information, things like current and previous addresses that you've lived at, all the names that you've gone by, and again, misspellings potentially. Another part that is on your credit report are inquiries. So every time you apply for a credit card or a loan, that'll show on there as well. Lenders will be wondering, hey, Marissa has actually applied for a loan several times, but she's been denied. Why is that? So they'll use that information to again, gauge how I'm doing with my credit. Public record is also on there. Those are things that are negative marks, things like bankruptcy, which is when you're unable to pay some of or all of your debts. The other factor that's on there are previous and current loan details. These are all the loans that you've had or currently had, and it gauges how well you were able to manage everything. If you have negative information on your credit report, that will stay on there for 7 to 10 years. So again, hopefully this information is helpful to get you to avoid getting to that point, especially if you were able to attend the banking and budgeting session earlier. One common question that we come across is that if I check my credit score, it's going to be a negative impact on me. That's actually not true. So if you are interested at any point wondering what your credit score is, if you're interested in looking at what that is, go ahead and do that. You can do that as many times. It won't impact you negatively. The only time it counts as a negative mark is when you're actually applying for something like a card or a loan. So let's revisit that pop quiz that we took earlier. Again, the question was, who will never need to look at your credit history? And if you guessed your high school principal, you are correct. Hopefully what you've learned so far is that your high school principal is not one of the folks who's going to be looking at your credit history. There's really no reason for them to do that unless, for example, they're your lender, your landlord, but I don't think that will be the case. So just something to keep in mind as you are preparing to build your credit. If you're interested in looking at your credit report, we recommend checking out annualcreditreport.com. It's government mandated and it's the only official website to check your credit report. And bonus points, it's free. So when you get the chance, especially as you get older and start building your history of credit, check out your history on this website. But note that some websites have similar names. So make sure that you're checking the link to guarantee that you're on the right page. Parents and guardians, if you are listening to this presentation, note that all credit reporting companies do not knowingly keep credit files of children under 13. So if you suspect someone is using your child's information illegally, you should contact all 3 of those bureaus and report the situation. File a police report with your local law enforcement agency so that it can be taken care of right away and avoid anything like fraud or just anything negative. Stay away from that. Let's talk a little bit more about what the credit score specifically is. You might have heard the term FICO, and that is the most popular scoring model that's used amongst lenders. So if you hear that, that's what that means. It's just your credit score. Again, the credit score is a number that reflects your credit history, specific number, just like your GPA on your report card. Not everyone looks at the full credit report. So lenders will look at the overall score because it's easier to find on the report. It's a quick snapshot of what they can see and how to gauge your credibility. The score will take information from your credit report and calculate that score to show generally where you stand financially. If a lender isn't sure that they can rely on that number, that's when they might look at your credit history on your report to make certain that they are being wise and lending you that money and can trust that you're going to pay them back. Credit scores range from 300 to 850, and of course, the higher the score, the better. So we want to make sure that you're walking away tonight with the goal of having a credit score of 750 or higher, because that'll put you in that excellent standing. When credit reports are used is when financial institutions ask, will they pay us back? If I loan this money to Marissa for this RV, is she going to pay me back? Hopefully my credit score will show them that I am a responsible borrower and I will promise to pay my debts. Again, remember that credit helps lenders determine if they can trust you and loan you money to do business with you. At some point in your life, you may experience a lower score, and that's okay. Hopefully, again, this information is preparing you for a better credit score later on and for the rest of your life. We want to show you that you can improve that or avoid having a lower score at all. So again, the goal here is to aim for that high score. You can achieve that high score by a number of factors. The biggest one that you can actually manage is your payment history. This is looking at, are you paying everything on time? Are you paying your loans? Are you paying the right amount that's due? Which leads us to the second factor that's taken into consideration, the amounts owed. This is the second biggest factor, and it looks at how much debt you currently have and how much money you can take out. So we recommend keeping your balance at no more than 30% of what's available. Lenders look to see if there's a big gap between how much is available and how much you actually have taken out. So if there's a big gap there, you're in good standing and it's showing that you're responsible about how much you owe. Other factors that are taken into account but are not as heavily weighed are shown here as well, and we can dive into those too so that you know how to build your credit score. Length of credit history is a factor. It's looking at how new are you to the credit game? Are you just starting out? Can lenders trust you? Do you have a big history, and what is in that history? So that's something to take into account, as well as new credit, the other factor. How many times have you asked for a loan? Like I mentioned earlier, if someone's looking at my credit report and they see that I've actually applied for a loan several times and have been denied several times, they're going to be wondering, why is that? Should I take a chance on Marissa and loan her this money? Can I trust that she's going to pay me back? And then the last part is types of credit. Where do your loans and your debt lie? How many things are you managing at once? And again, how well? How well are you managing your mortgage for your house or your loan for your car? How well are you managing the debt on your credit card? So all these factors are taken into consideration that make up your credit score. But again, the biggest thing that you can do and focus on is your payment history. Make sure that you're paying everything on time. So let's talk about the benefits of good credit. We have an example for you if you go onto the car lot, and I'll show you here in a bit what that visual looks like. But just note that these are not current rates. We just want to show you what the impact is if your score is higher versus lower. So imagine that you're going to the car lot and you're really excited to buy this car. You find a car that is within your budget at $30,000 and you sign on a loan that you will pay it back in 5 years. So let's take a look at how much you'll be paying in that 5 years based on your credit score. Looking at the top row, if you have a score of 750 or even higher, you're given an interest rate of 2.74 with a monthly payment of 536. Your total interest paid is 2,136 over those 5 years. Now let's look at the opposite and go down to the bottom row. If your score is below 600, your interest rate has now gone up significantly higher to 18%. Your monthly payment is 762. And the total interest paid over those 5 years is $15,708. So let's take a moment to think about that information and see what the difference was. If I had the higher credit score, I'm not just paying $30,000 over 5 years because interest has accrued over time. In total, with a higher credit score, I will have paid $32,136. So still more money than I probably expected, but lower, as low as can be. If I had that credit score below 600, I'm not paying $30,000 over 5 years. With the interest added on, I'm paying $45,708 for that car. So this just shows you what the impact is depending on what your credit score is. So the higher, the better. You're going to get the lowest rate possible. The lower it is, it's going to be harder to actually get approved for a loan. And just note that if you do have someone that approves to give you a loan, if your credit score is below 600, your interest rate, as you see here, is going to be much higher, as well as your monthly payment. So everything will add up over time. The benefit of having a good credit score is that you're saving more in the long run. If you do find someone who will lend to you, remember it's all about trust. So make sure that you're staying on top of your credit and just being responsible. Building and maintaining good credit. So I know we've gone over a lot of information tonight. It can be overwhelming. It might even be scary. I remember when I got my first credit card and my mom gave it to me and didn't really give much explanation, and I had no idea what to do with it. I don't want you to feel that way. And so hopefully this information will get you prepared for that start. If you're not quite sure where to get started, we have a couple options for you to consider no matter where your finances are. So we have a couple options we like to think of as training wheels for credit building. Think about when you go to the mall and you're checking out, you're at the register, and they say, congratulations, you have been pre-approved for this credit card. You get to save 10% today and 10% on all future purchases with us. That might sound great. And if you're ready to sign up for that, please do. But something to consider before you sign off is, am I feeling responsible and ready to manage this credit card? What does that really look like? So if you're not quite sure where to get started, here are a few things to consider. Before we dive into each one, I do want to note every time you apply for a credit card, your score is lowered. So with that in mind, one option to consider is a secured credit card. Remember, because it's a credit card, your credit will be pulled. Once you're approved, you'll place a deposit of a certain limit so that you don't charge more than you can afford to pay. For example, if you start a secured credit card at BECU, you put $500 into your savings. BECU will put that $500 into a credit card for you. And that way, if you don't pay your credit card when it's due, BECU will still have their money at hand. They'll still get their money at the end of the day. So over time, make small purchases on that credit card, make the payments, show that you're responsible. And after 6 to 12 months, we usually say, go back to your financial institution and show them, I have been responsible about my card. I've made purchases, I pay them back, I do so on time. And I'm interested in actually getting a traditional credit card where I can get a higher limit. Do that, and they'll be able to work with you to see what is possible for you. Another option to consider is having a co-signer. What a co-signer is someone who can sign on your loan or your card for you, and that is basically your backup or advocate. So if you applied for a card, you can have a parent co-sign for you so that the financial institution can see someone is willing to take on your debt if you don't take care of it yourself. And likewise, if you are asked to be a co-signer on someone's loan or credit card, you will be responsible for their debt as well if they can't pay it back. So make sure that you're considering what that really looks like if you're asked to be a co-signer or if you need to have a co-signer on your stuff. One thing to note there is that if the main borrower's credit is affected because they missed a payment, for example, whoever is co-signed on that will also be affected because you're joint together. The other option to consider is the share secured loan. That is similar to a secured credit card, except that it's pretty much available to everyone, which is good. The biggest difference is that your credit is not pulled because it's not a credit card. So there are a few other differences that we can talk more about. When you're ready to get started, come in to BECU and just give us a call. And of course, in any of these options, pay your cards and loans off on time. Don't borrow more than you can afford. But these steps can help you establish your credit if you're not quite sure where to get started. Now let's recap all the main points. Hopefully one of those main points was to be responsible. But let's dive into them specifically. So number one, pay on time every time. Remember, this is the biggest thing you can do to build your credit. If you have trouble at all, if you're going to miss your payment or there's just some sort of issue that's going on, call your financial institution for immediate support. They will work with you to find a solution so that you're not impacted too badly. Number two, read and understand the credit contract. Look at the fine print that you're signing to. Does 0% interest really mean 0%? Maybe, but it might not. So make sure that you're looking at that fine print to make sure that you know what you're signing up for. At what point could that 0% jump up to another rate, something higher where you have to pay more over time? Because you might end up paying more than you expected to. Number 3, keep your credit balances low. Pay promptly. And again, remember that lenders like to see that big gap between how much you have available and how much you actually have taken out. So don't bite off more than you can chew. Number 4, saving. Get into the habit of saving. Save your money so that you can pay off your debt if you're charging your credit card, if you have a loan, and especially if an emergency comes up. We always recommend having savings available so that you are paying your bills, especially if the unexpected happens. And number 5, monitor your reports. Remember that your report may have errors, so it's important to catch those sooner rather than later. Report anything that's lost. If you lose your credit card, make sure that you're bringing that up as well so that you can put a block on that and no fraud happens. So now we're at the end, and I'm going to pull in my friend Stacy Black to address any questions that you might have had along the way. And if you have a question still that you haven't asked, go ahead and just take this time to enter that into the chat box. Again, that's on the right side, and we'll be happy to address everything. So Stacy, I'm happy to have you here with me. Could you let me know what kinds of questions that we might have come across?
Yeah, we have a lot of great questions coming in, and I'm excited to address some of these. It was great information. Thank you, Marissa. Someone asked, if my parents have really bad credit, how can I get good credit when I turn 18?
That's a good question. So again, those 3 options that we looked at last, and I'll just jump over really quick so you see a visual. We have the secured credit card, the cosigner, or share secured loan. Those are options to consider to help you, again, get started. But Stacy, as the financial educator you are, you're so great at it. If you could also let them know what advice you might have.
Yeah, and your parents' credit shouldn't affect you. It would only affect you if you were on an account with them. I should say a loan account with them. So you don't have to worry about that, but it's just starting out slow and making sure that you follow some of the tips Marissa talked about, managing your credit and using it wisely. So I agree. My favorite way to tell people to start out is a secured credit card. And I personally wish I would have known about those when I was younger. So it would have helped me a lot. Let's see, Marissa, we have Jessica said, and you probably talked about this earlier, but I think it's worth saying again, what is the difference between a credit report and a credit score?
Yeah, good question, Jessica. So again, one of our very common questions, and the example that we like to use is that GPA and report card example. So your report card is the overall look at your academics. It shows all your classes that you've taken, all the teachers that you've had, maybe what grade you got in that class, and then your GPA gives you that specific number that shows overall where you stand academically. So that same concept applies to your credit report and your credit score. The credit report is going to be the overall look at your history, how many loans you have, how many credit cards you have, every time you've been denied for something that you apply for. And then your credit score is going to be that specific number that gauges where you are in your credit standing. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that was a good answer. And I would say that it just makes it easier for lenders. They can just look at that number, just like my parents used to look at my GPA and then have a little talk with me. Okay, John is asking, is the balance you have on your credit card recorded continually or occasionally?
If I'm understanding the question, sorry, Stacey, could you repeat that one?
Yeah. Is the balance you have on your credit card recorded continually or only occasionally? And I think what John is asking, in terms of your credit report, your balance is recorded usually about once a month. It's just when the lender decides to add that. I don't know if you have anything to add there, Marissa.
Yeah, that's actually a good answer in a nutshell.
And if we didn't answer your question, let us know. But another question came in from Lindsay. She's asking, what is the difference between a debit card and a credit card? And this is a great question as well that we get a lot when we're teaching in high school classrooms.
Definitely. So the debit card is where you make a purchase. If you swipe your card, that money is being taken out of your account automatically. You have it at hand, you just used it, and now it's gone. With the credit card, if you swipe your card, you're taking out that money to, well, let me back up. Your credit card allows you to buy for something in that moment. Let's say it's a big TV. You might not have those funds in hand in your checking account, but using the credit card allows you to buy that with $1,000 in the moment to pay it back later, because maybe not in that moment you have that $1,000, but in a month you will with your next paycheck. After your paycheck has kicked in, you have the $1,000, and now you can pay it back. Hopefully that answers your question. Stacey, is there anything that you'd like to maybe add there to clarify?
I just usually say, just remember, debit card is your money, credit card is someone else's money, and you have to pay it back plus extra, which is interest, right? So you're promising to pay them back in the future. And that's why Marissa talked a lot about trust and how important that trust is. All right, it looks like, oh, and I believe you addressed this, but this is such a common question. Gavin is asking, if you check your own credit, does that hurt you? And I heard you talk about this, but it's worth repeating because I didn't realize this until I got into the job I'm in.
Right, definitely. Same with me. That's a really good question. So we often hear that if you are interested in looking at your credit score, your credit report, it's going to be a negative impact on you. That's not true. If you're interested in looking at it anytime yourself, please do so that you're making sure that you're on track with where you want to be. It's only a negative impact to pull your credit when you are actually applying for something. So if I applied for a credit card, my credit will be deducted just a little bit, but again, I can work to improve that over time.
All right, and then we have another question from Eli. What is an authorized user, and does that help build your credit?
That's a good question too. And Stacey, I'm going to turn this one back to you because I love the example that you give with your own experience and your kids. If you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, my kids love it when I talk about them in class. Hopefully they're not online listening. But an authorized user back in the day used to be a great way to start out building credit. So typically parents might put you as an authorized user, meaning you get a credit card and it has your name on it. And guess what? You get to use it up to the limit that has been set. Now, I would say now more than ever, lenders don't take into account authorized users as much. So if you're an authorized user on your parent's card, even though you're not responsible to pay it back, you can use it as much as you want. But typically, lenders don't really take that into consideration just because they know you're not responsible to pay it back. So it used to be more so being an authorized user could really help build your credit, but I would say the majority of lenders don't even take that into consideration anymore. But it looks like those are all the questions. Marissa, did you have anything to add?
Awesome. I think the last thing I'll say is if there's anything you're taking away from this, credit can be overwhelming. It's a lot to think about, but we are so happy to talk with you more about it. If you have questions, if you're interested in starting on credit, come in to BECU, give us a call, or if you have any questions, you can email communityrelations@becu.org so we can talk more. But again, another thing that I'd like to share is be responsible and just manage your finances, pay on time. It's all based on trust. So we hope that you enjoyed this session and learned a lot. Again, if you have questions, please do feel free to reach out. And thank you, Stacey, for joining me and helping answer some questions that we had from you. All right, have a good night.